Hi, I'm Monique Jones, a board member of the Magic City Poetry Festival. As we have seen in recent days, America is in dire straits. A black man was killed in cold blood by a Minneapolis police officer. That black man's name is George Floyd. Unfortunately, he is only one of several black men and women that have been killed in recent weeks. And even more saddening beyond that is that he is one of hundreds of thousands of black men and women and children that have been killed in America since who knows when. It's part of America's history, it's part of its fabric, it's something that black Americans know about, but as we have seen in some of the discourse that keeps happening when people get killed in recent years, and even with George Floyd's death, we've seen that not all of America understands that history or knows of that history or wants to even recognize that history. And so when it's put in their face, as it has been with George Floyd and many others, there's always this question of how did this happen? Is this America? I've never seen this side of America before. This is not the America I know. Unfortunately, this is the America that a lot of Americans know. Um, and it's sad that it takes a person's death for everyone to, well, everyone meaning the people who don't know about this history. It's sad that it takes a man's death to make people aware of what they should already know. Uh, if we take life seriously, American life seriously, then we should want to know all sides of American history. Not just the glorified sides, but the sides that need reckoning with. So, for everyone that is questioning where did this America come from, this is not the America I know, I'm reading from my book today, the book of Awesome Black Americans, to show that this America has been here. And it'll continue to be here until those in power, i.e., white Americans, decide that they do not want to have the privileges of allowing people to die for their livelihood. So I'm going to read a little bit to show the America that a lot of black Americans have been dealing with uh, for forever, for throughout the history of this country. Uh, there were thousands of martyrs in Black America's struggle for equality, including the 4,400 people who were lynched, drowned, burned, or shot in the South as a result of Jim Crow laws up to about 1950. Those men, women, and children are thankfully now honored at Montgomery's National Memorial for Peace and Justice, spearheaded by the founder of the Equal Justice Initiative and public interest lawyer Bryan Stevenson. Stevenson's career can be seen as a bridge between the civil rights movement's past and its present, seeing how he has constantly brought his activism into the courtroom and the public sphere with the EJI. His museum, dedicated to the thousands of souls lost to racist violence, brings their stories back to life and honors them in a way that reminds us that the fight is not over. While too many of the martyrs in our march toward civil rights have died with their names unetched in the annals of history, there are also others that became infamous in death, such as Emmett Till, the 14-year-old boy from Chicago who was killed in 1955 while visiting his relatives in Money, Mississippi. 4 days after Till was wrongfully accused of flirting with a white woman, the woman's husband and her brother tortured Till. They made him carry a 75-pound cotton gin fan to the Tallahatchie riverbank, where he was made to take off his clothes. The two men beat him, gouged out one of his eyes, shot him in the head, tied his body to the fan with barbed wire, and threw the boy in the river. When his body was recovered, he was nearly unrecognizable. His mother, Mamie Till, ordered for her son to have an open casket funeral so people could see what racial violence had done to her boy's life and image. The gruesome images of Till's disfigured face were published in Jet, a magazine we will learn about later in the book. The photographs rocked the nation, especially in pockets of people who had trouble recognizing that the horrors Black Americans were fighting against were real. Medgar Evers is another casualty of the movement. A civil rights leader in Mississippi, Evers and his family were constantly fighting for their lives amid attacks on their home and personhood. Evers and his family were lucky at first, avoiding a firebomb attack on their home. Despite this, Evers was shot in the back in his own driveway by white supremacist Byron de la Beckwith. He was pronounced dead at the local hospital less than 30 minutes later. It was this tragedy that led his brother and fellow activist, Charles Evers, to take over Medgar's spot within the NAACP as State Field Secretary for Mississippi. Charles was elected mayor of Fayette, Mississippi in 1969, making him the first black mayor of a racially mixed southern town since Reconstruction. The murder of Selma rights activist Jimmy Lee Jackson was the catalyst for the marches from Selma to Montgomery. In life, Jackson was a deacon and activist who also served his country in the Vietnam War before coming home to injustice in his own state. After his grandfather Cager Lee, and his mother Viola Lee Jackson were turned away from registering to vote in his hometown of Marion in 1962, Jackson became involved in fighting for voting rights. He participated in all manner of protests and boycotts and attended meetings leading him towards his tragic death. Marches in both Selma and Marion ended with brutal results. For instance, in Marion, 7,000 children were arrested for marching, and in Selma, during a march of over 3,000 people, civil rights leader C.T. Vivian was clubbed and arrested by Selma's Sheriff Jim Clark. The latter event led Vivian to lead another march in Marion. The night march took place February 18th in 1969, with over 200 people taking part. State troopers and Marion's police chief ordered the group to break up, and after a black minister was struck by a trooper, marchers quickly panicked and began running for shelter. Jackson and his mother ran into Mac's Cafe, where they saw Lee staggered in, bleeding from being beaten. Jackson tried to get his grandfather to a hospital, but they were caged in by troopers and marchers alike. A trooper struck Viola, and Jackson tried to take down the trooper, but his heroism led to his death. The trooper clubbed him and knocked him against a cigarette machine, and another trooper shot Jackson in the stomach. He died at Selma's Good Samaritan Hospital 8 days after the attack. Jackson sacrificed his life for the right to vote. So if you're on the fence about voting, consider Jackson's life the next time you think about not casting your ballot. My hometown of Birmingham also had its share of sacrifices. The most famous martyrs from my city are Denise McNair, Addie Mae Collins, Cynthia Wesley, and Carol Robertson, otherwise known to the world as the Four Little Girls. On a fateful Sunday in September of 1963, they were preparing for a church service in the basement restroom of the 16th Street Baptist Church in downtown Birmingham. A bomb went off. Most of the damage was done in the basement, where the girls were killed. They weren't the only children to be affected by the blast. One other girl, Sarah Collins, Addie Mae's sister, was also with the girls during the bombing. Sarah managed to survive, but lost her right eye. Riots broke out in response to the attack, and as a result, two more children, Virgil Ware and Johnny Robinson, were killed. On the whole, over 20 others were injured either from the blast or the riots. Living in a place like Birmingham allows you to never be too far removed from history. Even though the events of the church are now in the past, the church itself is still open for Sunday service. Several of the girls' family members still reside in the city as well. A stark reminder that while the girls' lives have become simply a part of American history, they are still lost loved ones bereaved by their family members first. And I think that last part is what we should uh, really focus on, is that all these men and women and children who have been killed in recent years, in past years, even since slavery, were someone's family member. They aren't just names. They aren't just subjects to learn about in school. These are real people whose lives were affected by white supremacist violence. And it's important that we name that type of violence and that we name those people who were affected by that violence. And it's important that those who benefit from that type of violence recognize what their privileges are and that they hopefully decide to use their privilege as white Americans to stand up for those who don't have those same privileges. So, uh, with that, I leave you, and hopefully, uh, we will be able to have a better future despite all of this carnage.